Hey everyone, what we're going to do today is another wacky jig tie. In the vise we got a 1/8 ounce wacky jig that was made out of a do-it wacky jig mold. It's a size 2 hook, and as you can see I bent the weed guard out a little bit to make it easier to tie. The color is black neon. It's hard to see in the light, but there is red flake in that. Uh, The name of this is called a silky chicken. I call it that because it uses chicken feathers and marabou, and the marabou has a silky texture to it, so that's the only reason I call it that. But let's get started. We're gonna start with 2 10 flat wax nylon thread, black of course. I'm gonna go all the way down that it's hanging right by the barb there. Cut the excess off. I'm going to work my thread all the way back up. Now I'm going to take my feathers and I'm going to tie them in hands apart like that on each side. So you see there's a natural curve to the feathers. I'm going, boy, I'm having a hard time separating them here. And tie one on each side so they're like that. So take the first one. Let's get it started. Hold them in position once you get them started and work your way down. You want the stems to be even on the hook shank. Now we have that tied in. I'm going to take 2 marabou plumes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them together and I'm going to grab the tips and I wet them just to make it so I have a tie-in point. I'm going to tie the marabou plumes in. Cut off the excess here. Now you can use your hands to wrap, or you could use little hackle pliers. I like the hackle pliers. It makes it easier to hold. For me, it does. And as you see, I lost a marabou plume, and that's quite common. Uh, the stems on marabou are really, really fragile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find another point here that I could tie in and that I could keep relatively close to uh, same size as what I already have tied in. The breaking of the stem wasn't supposed to happen. I apologize for that. But it happens. And if you find yourself having to wet your fingers because of how fluffy these feathers are, that's no problem. It dries right out. And like me, with big fat fingers, you have to wet the plumes in order to get it manageable. Okay, let's start this again. Take my hackle pliers, and now I'm going to start wrapping the marabou. And as I'm wrapping, I'm going to pull the feathers or the fibers, whatever you want to call them, I'm going to pull them back. Just keep spinning it around till you run out. And the reason you do too is it's gonna make a nice thick jig, because marabou compresses in the water, and if you make it too thin, there are some jigs that work really good like that, but this particular one, you want the feathers to be pretty heavy so that it has a nice bulk in the water. And with the chicken feathers on the back, the hackle, you get the same effect as you do with the ledge jigs, the preacher jigs that everybody's talking about now on the ledge fishing lakes, that you don't need a trailer. The feathers do a good job. So now I cut my stems off here. Wet my fingers and brush the fibers back. Tie it in pretty good. Now I'm going to take some crystal flash, and since this is black and red head, I'm going to use black and red flash. Take one piece. Tie it in once, fold it over. Trim it, and you want to trim it just about even with the bottom of the marabou feathers. Put a couple strands on each side. And instead of throwing that excess away, I'll put a couple strands on the back, because there are going to be it's not going to be overdo it, because there are going to be more marabou that's going to go over the top. Now we're going to take our next marabou plume, and you can see I stripped the feathers off of that already. You take your marabou plume, you stroke it out, and right where the stem is pretty thick, it'll start thinning out. Right there is where you want to strip it out, where the nasty part of the feather is. A lot of times it's like on these black ones, it's discolored. It'll be white. You just strip all that away, and it makes it easier to work with. So now I'm going to tie it in. Just tie it in from the tip. What I do is I like to wet my fingers and get that stem and a few fibers wet, that it gives me a point to tie in at. And just keep in mind that they are fragile, so hackle pliers. Start spinning and brushing the fibers back. just like you did with that first one with the double plume. And see this, when you put the double plume down and then the singles on top of it, it makes a nice tapering effect. It really looks great when it comes through the water. And since you have a wire weed guard on here, you could get this pretty good in the rocks without getting hung up. Pretty good hair jig overall. And as you can see, this is where the wet in the fingers comes in, because you got all this fluff in the way. So you want to pull it back that you could tie off and cut the stem out. Just be careful not to cut your thread. I've done that already, trust me. Now we're going to take another plume. This will be the fourth one. And you're going to do that. Sometimes if you get real nice, big, thick, long plumes, you can do it with 3. I've had them take sometimes 6, using small ones, the ends in the scrap that I keep. Now, I just folded that end over, and we're going to cut a little bit of the excess off. And again, our hackle pliers onto the stem and start spinning again. Always pushing the fibers back. And we might get another one in this. I believe we will. Now you see where we're at. We can leave that go and build up a collar, or we can add one more plume to it. And I think we'll add one more. So again, take your plume, hold it by the tip, and just stroke the fibers back, and you'll expose that tip. You can wet your fingers. Wet your fingers and push that all back so you have a clean tie-in area. Hackle pliers on, and we'll spin. This will be the last one. This is a nice full hair jig, and you don't need a trailer. Those hackle feathers that we tied in at the beginning, they do really well to create some action. Got it secured, cut the stem off. Now all we got to do is finish it up with our collar and some head cement. And when we make this collar, we're going to cinch it down pretty good as we're tying. And this will hold it all together. And the first time I worked with marabou, I thought, oh, this thing is going to fall apart. Believe it or not, these actually last a long time. I've had them in rocks and didn't rip them apart. And that's a good collar. We're going to whip finish. And before you whip finish, wet your fingers and brush it back because, well, it'll get caught in your thread. Eight, cinch, and one more time. 6, 3, 4, 5, 6. Trim. Sally Hansen's hard as nails. This works really good as head cement. It's thin enough that it penetrates the threads. All the years I've been using, I've never had a problem. And as you know, if I'm using silicone skirt strands, I use Loctite super glue brush on. And we'll take our wire weed guard and we'll push it down into place. Looks straight. And there you have it. The Silky chicken. And you can see that when this gets wet, all this will compress and you'll have your two little hackle pieces down here. They'll give it action. You'll have a built-in trailer. Very good. Here's one I tied up the other day the same way. This one here I made, as you can see, I made longer hackle pieces that you can make them as long as you want, short as you want. Experiment, see which the fish like better. But give it a shot. Works really well. I think you'll like it. Thanks for watching.